welcome, everybody, to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am gonna get in airplane mode in a minute. In the meantime,
he's in airplane mode.
A man who, when he was a Christian, prayed in a way that put the ooh in hallelujah. Hallelujah. The Lou. A man who needs no introduction. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Happy Mother's Day. How are you doing?
I'm good. So
Excellent.
speaking of Mother's Day, today's topic is how to cope with the religious mother. I
have two. Okay.
And it's interesting topic. So for me, this Mother's Day especially is difficult because I feel like I'm really struggling with my family. And so that's kind of the motivation for this. I don't know how many other people are feeling that way, but I think there's this sort of, it's like a lot of the other holidays we deal with where, Christmas is supposed to be a certain way, and Thanksgiving or Easter, maybe all these things used to be a certain way for you, but things are different as a non-believer, especially if you being a non-believer significantly changes the way you see your family or your relationship with them. And so I kind of wanted to, have a constructive space to explore some of that for whoever that might be helpful. But yeah, I'm in a rough place. I really feel like my family is so religious, at least as things are right now. We can't really be there for each other in the way that I would like. I just think they don't know any other way to relate to the world. And I feel like my family is the problem with religion. So, a lot of people may say, oh, when it comes to this stuff, oh, I just leave it alone, or, but for me, I wouldn't even be out here probably if I just thought religion was somebody else's problem. Like, my family to me is toxic. They're just on that religious tip, and everybody has to roll the dice, and I feel like I was set up by my family to fail because I was set up in a way that was, oh, you should go get an education. Everything was about religion. And then they present these situations to me over the years. So one example I always think of on Mother's Day is my mom riding in a car with me, asking me about the Creation Museum. Okay, now I'm in a tough spot, right? Because I either have to, go along with some, Ken Ham narrative, or I have to have the difficult conversation about, that's not a museum, that place is a fraud, and they're lying to you about the Bible. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So we had I kind of tried to handle that gently, but there's all these seed moments that really make you fight for your sanity in a sense. Like, I had to make an issue of my grandparents not saying praise the Lord when they answer the phone. Like, I'm sorry, like, you're 70. Like, you needed to have learned by now that that's not appropriate. And I'm sorry you don't recognize that's a command for other people to worship your God. But again, nobody has ever been upset because you said good afternoon, priest or residence. ever. But they're the type of people who answer the phone, praise the Lord. Like, no, just no. And they are so to me it was like out of love, out of care. I'm the type of person who is going to be candid and honest with people, especially people who convince me that they're honest, good faith people who really want the truth. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like my family forced me through their manipulation of how people perceive them to feel about them like they were, caring, honest people who really want the truth. And then I feel punished for falling for it when really they were just religious grifters. And had I known that they're just religious grifters who don't care and are going to be abusive once they realize people don't believe in a way that's comfortable for them, I might not have wasted my time. But I think a lot of people are dealing with this. And this is one of the realities of being in a Christian family, especially as a non-Christian, is I think you're treated in a way that puts the onus on you to accommodate their faith. Mm-hmm. And that burden is never flipped. And people don't realize just how domineering that is. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. But I did send my mom a gift card, and Happy Mother's Day with it, and she texted me and we exchanged "I love you." So I'm not trying to be a cruel or inhumane person, but I said yesterday, because we did a stream about black conservatism, like who are the real black conservatives. And to me, it's a lot of the people who are Democrats and vote blue, but they just feed into a certain way of being that reinforces the status quo. And I certainly think my family fits that mold. But more to the point, I said during that show that I just cannot support religious figures playing leadership roles in our communities, because Black people deserve the truth. And so I don't know how to deal. I don't know how to deal with it, because I feel like I wasn't prepared to grow up in a family that is truth denying, because it was just imaginable for me. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know where you're at this Mother's Day, my one Black friend, but if there's anything you do want to say or talk about before we get going with the footage.
No, yeah, I'm not in a hospital, so I'm in a good place. And if I was in a hospital, it'd probably be the best place for me. I don't have the same background as far as my father, when he was a minister for a time, but by the time I was born, he wasn't anymore. He was no longer doing that. So there's a lot that you would have seen that I didn't see. The way that my grandmother spoke about Jesus, I thought he was a member of the family, and I'd see him at the family reunion one day if I just would go.
Same facts, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really used to have that opinion when I was a child, like, well, I'll see Jesus at the family reunion because grandma's always talking about it. And so proud of Jesus she was. I guess my approach is a bit different in terms of my family. When I came out to them as an atheist, there were no challenges. They know me well enough that I clearly have put in a lot of time researching this. This was not a snap decision. I don't make those very often. And if they started asking questions, they might start getting answers they don't like that would make them uncomfortable. So there was no pushback for me. There's been no questions other than one brother that began with the phrase, as an atheist, how do I see things? What's my interpretation of it? Because I already know my interpretation can make them uncomfortable because I challenge the material that they're deriving some of their worldview from. That could be difficult for anyone to receive when someone is saying, hey, I know you have this worldview. It's very precious to you, and here's what's wrong with it. There are people in our society who actually need to have that conversation. They need to be on the receiving end of that conversation. Well, yeah, I guess, okay, I believe in some things that weren't the best things. Like, you absolutely do. So, answering the phone, praise the Lord. Oh, so many people did this when I was a kid. I used to hear this when I would call.
Really?
people.
Was it more common? Because it's felt most of my life like it's just my grandparents, but
It's not.
It makes a little bit more sense if they're sort of hanging on to a Christian tradition that used to be more common in, I guess, what we would call decidedly Christian households.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I turned 51 in a few months. So, back in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, I'd hear this. After 2000, I rarely heard it so much. And maybe somebody got the idea that just saying hello is better. But caller ID came along during that time, so you sort of knew who was on the phone if you had caller ID. So, my I guess my deal, I'm a very live and let live kind of person. And if you challenge me and it isn't something, it isn't a challenge that sort of makes me say, I need to consider that. You have to prepare to be challenged back. I have an aunt. She doesn't answer the phone, praise the Lord, but her voicemail says, "This is a day that the Lord has made." She really sounds like that. She says that, and that's where she's coming from. But if I wanted to be rather difficult, I could start citing some of the societal ills that we see in the world. And why would God make that if he's a perfectionist? Seems like he'd have better ideas, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's strapped for ideas. I don't know. Um, we can pick at them, or we could just get down to why we called. Grandma, I called because you were on my mind. I was thinking about you, wondering how you're doing. Oh, it's Mother's Day, and I just want to tell you you've been a positive influence in my life in the following ways, and I love and appreciate you, and I'm just calling to tell you that. It could come from a very simple place that has no attachment to the faith issue. It has no attachment to, like, I think some ministers, for the most ministers probably are very sincere, most clergy people. And then there are the grifters. And you could almost tell the grifters, in my opinion, by how nice their home and car are, if they don't have a different job. My nephew's grandfather was a minister, but he worked at a steel mill. Back in the 80s, he was probably making $24 an hour. He had a couple of nice cars. He lived in a very nice home. Without being a minister, he could have still afforded all those things. So for me, at the time when I believed in God, he just seemed like a stand-up guy, like a good guy. And I would look at a person that had what he has or does what he does in modern times. Well, he's probably just a stand-up guy. He's doing this ministry thing because he believes in it. With your family, you have a front row seat to know if they're doing the ministry thing because they believe in it, or is it simply one of the best ways ever made to make money with very little effort. It's what is it, the 4-hour work week? Well, it's more like a 16-hour work week.
Right.
But hey, you got all that free time
Sure,
and you're
sure.
making money in your free time because other people are paying you to tell them what they should do come Sunday. And then you get up there in front of the microphone and you tell personal stories and everybody's edified. And you might mention one or two scriptures, as I've seen minister after minister do, or you're like a Stephen Furtick, and it's, how do they not see it? It's theater. It's theater.
Right.
And you have the audience which craves it. Now let me swing it back around to dealing with parents. My mother, she is currently in like a rehab facility. She went through some stuff medically recently, and when she wanted a certain, send me this, I need this, she didn't pray for those things. She called me. I am much more reliable than her prayers to God, right? Much more reliable. I have Amazon.com, and I simply go in there, order what she wants, and have it shipped to her location. Easy peasy. She doesn't even have to contribute any money, just her needs. So you may want to adopt, depending on how you interact with your mother. And audience, please join us. You may want to adopt the attitude of, hey, I have some responsibilities here. And as someone who loves your mother, someone who loves your grandparents, in a way, there's almost a responsibility to respond. And you can respond in a way that is not you have to respond in a way that is not injurious to you. If their religious practices are disgusting to you, you have to channel the conversation away from that. And maybe the way you can do it with the praise the Lord bit is make a bet with them about something you know for sure.
So they don't do that anymore because
they don't do it anymore.
Yeah, they know they can't do that with me anymore. I don't know. I'm at
Do they have caller
I'm
ID?
at a different place, and I just think I'm done taking responsibility for their lack of personal growth. Right, like it's on them to relate to me differently, and I'm look, other people can do that, but my situation is that became the source of my religious trauma. I mean, to the point that now makes my skin crawl. Like I like feel pain back up in here as I was listening to you. Like it's painful to me.
Wow.
Like actually, yeah, because that's what I dealt with. That's the weight I've been trying to get off my back. And my whole adult life has been just talk about the weather, talk about the football game. Oh, happy everybody's doing well. And I don't know. It feels like this thing they call it like gray rocking or something. But it's like when you're dealing with an abusive relationship, you just try to do everything to make sure you're not vulnerable to this person, right? So you keep the conversation to things that are safe for both of you, and it just felt like they already died. They died. They're just dead. Like that's what it felt like. They're dead. They're dead. Only I have to now watch them die for decades. Right? That's literally the feeling. Because they're dead. They're gone. Because there was no hope anymore. There was no hope of actually relating to them as an adult. There was no possibility even that they would ever realize what was, because and I also believe this is part of the deliberate abusive nature of religious people, and for most of us, it's like we've been talking about with racism, and this is a really important point I think for me that I'm kind of realizing as we're having this conversation.
Okay.
It just is what it is. When we've been talking a lot to people about racist dog whistling and problematic behavior in our community. And a lot of the people who apologize for the bad actors are constantly challenging us with, well, we don't know why these people are doing these things. And You know, we don't know what's really in their hearts, and can we really tell if they're bigots or not? And we're like, look, racism isn't about hearts and minds. It's about the effect you have on people. And so part of the crazy cult world that we live in is we don't know who is Bible thumping because it's the easiest way to make money and who's Bible thumping because they're true believers. But for me, I'm terrified because they're both Bible thumping. And a lot of people take solace in, okay, well, my grandmother or my aunt isn't a grifter, they're just a true believer. But where does that go? That's what I'm dealing with. My family, I don't think they're grifters. I think they're true believers. And that's fucking terrifying. Because what do sheer believers do? They hold on to this thing for life. You know, my grandfather, we have been trying to get to retire. Like, I had this silly fantasy in my head because my mother's literally wanted him to retire, like, I can't even think of how long. Like, it's literally been at least a decade. And I remember being an undergrad sitting in my mom's living room, and she was explaining to my Jesus wife, Jeannie, back then, that, like, oh, you know, we want to get them out of here and move them to a different part of the world. Like, my mom wanted to, like, move them somewhere fun and beautiful and put them up in, like, great places to live and da-da-da-da-da. And they were like, nope, because we've got to ride or die on our ministry. And then even after they got sick with COVID and all this, they went, you know, they went back to church. The plan was my mom promised me, she said to me, because she kind of always my whole life looked down on the fact that especially the men in our family, as she saw it, were so dedicated to religion and preaching that they, like, started homes in the church. No, sorry, churches in the home.
Church homes?
Yeah. And so, like, you know, oh no, she remembered her grandfather, like, starting a church in her basement, right? And then moving to the storefront church. And so she always looked down on that. And she was like, oh, I would not let them run a church from the house. And that was a big deal for me because, to be honest, my mom and I's relationship was getting better because it's like, we were just, I was able to open up more with her about who I really was, and she was getting to know me, and it was fine. Like, I could talk about being a non-believer, I could talk about, you know, secular, it was fine. And then she changed her retirement plans from moving to either, like, Arizona. She loved, like, Arizona. She's gonna move somewhere warm where she could golf, but then she got all torn up by COVID, like most people did, and then she realized, oh, my parents are aging, and, you know, I want to be with them and spend time with them. I don't know how much longer they have. So she changes her mind, decides to go move to New Jersey, and then, like, build a house with my grandparents. And I'm like, immediately, I'm like, this is not going to be good. Like, I told her, like, that's fine. Like, you're a great daughter. Like, you know, like, I didn't think it was the best decision for her, but it's not my business. It's her retirement, it's her money. But I knew immediately, like, that was dramatically going to change our relationship, because you're going to be in the house with your parents who are cult leaders. And it's even though it's going to be her house and nope. They're such domineering figures in her life that I knew soon as they got under the same roof, everything was going to be different, because none of that was even going to feel safe to her, right? She's got to play the fucking role of basically the what they expect of her from being a little girl all of a sudden. She's always been this way. Like, her parents are just the outside. I think they fucked her all up when she was a little kid, to be honest with you. But anyway, like, what ended up happening was, like, somewhere in the middle of the pandemic, that whole plan just got accelerated. I was like, oh, no, we're just moving and we're doing it and we're going to move early or whatever. And so that's actually what's prompted a lot of this. it's I was unfortunately correct in the fact that, you know, the way our relationship was growing was not going to be safe once they were under the same roof. And that's exactly what's happened. And to the point, it's like, now he refused to retire, so he just runs the church out of their home, right? And she even like said something stupid to me, like, "Oh, it's not a." I guess because the congregation doesn't show up to their basement, she basically tried to gaslight me, telling me that's not them running a church out of the house. I'm like, literally, but that's what he does. He literally pastors from inside the house, including preaching from within the home. And so it's just like they don't get it. Like so I don't know. But that's my point is, we talk about this all the time with the genuine believers. It's almost worse because they do the PR for the grifters. And then because they're genuine believers and because they're such nice people, right, that puts the onus on us to a point that we can't even be honest with them. And so I always say this, like, we're never gonna, this is why I think, honestly, we're in a desperate situation when it comes to religion in this country. Because all the people have to do is make themselves too emotionally pathetic to be challenged. I genuinely believe it, and I'm also super sweet and nice, right? And you can't tell me I'm wrong about my faith because my personality will disintegrate in front of you. And so we always said this about like Rebecca, right? It's like, it's the person at the park who's offering you the sweet candy. Oh, I promise you it's going to be great. Oh, you want to go get the candy? Yeah, you just got to go over, see those guys in that blacked out van over there. Yeah, you just got to kind of knock on the back door of the van and there's some gentlemen in there and they'll set you real straight, right? So it's, I don't know if anybody else is feeling this way, but I just wanted to put it out there that for me, that was the source of trauma. It was also felt painfully dishonest because part of the issue I was having is we never talked about it. Here are these people, Jesus, like you said, very proud of Jesus, everything is Jesus forward. But at the end of the day, they don't want to talk about Jesus. And I realized that was so fundamentally frustrating for me, that all this time they've been beating me over the head with the religion. They never actually wanted to talk about what they believe. And I think on some level it's because they want to keep it bottled up inside and close because they know it sounds insane. And then it's worse to me that, like in your case, they find out that you're not a believer and then they just don't want to talk about it. To me, that is almost a confession that they're really at that point just trying to protect their ability to participate emotionally.
Must protect the belief at all costs.
Must protect the belief at all costs. And to me, that at some point we have to, at least for me, I had to expand my definition of abuse and dishonesty to include these type of willfully ignorant situations. Because even my mother does the same thing. So I had this one story with my grandfather where he had preached a sermon about, it was like one of them anti-drug sermons, and I was like, oh Lord. And so I found this research that suggested that, biblical scholars believe, Jesus potentially would have used cannabis in his healing ministry, and that there was cannabis as part of the anointing oil and all this shit. And I remember it was the most disappointing moment I had in my life with him. He wouldn't read it.
Yeah.
I had enough credibility with him that he knew I wouldn't be, sending him introducing him to some nonsense, but he also, wasn't comfortable with the implications of what I was going to show him. And so the solution was just don't read it. So he actually refused to. I mean, it was a couple pages. He just refused to read it.
You could always read it to them if you really want them to know. And by the way, that's immensely more charitable than me thinking Jesus used actors in his healing ministry.
That's facts. But my mom's the same way, where I've made it very clear, like, you should look into these things. You should, like, and I always think this and I've said the same thing about Peter W. and some other Christians in our that we see out here on YouTube, that I think having an atheist having an atheist child is plenty enough reason to look into it and really get straight. And the fact that they won't do that, I just find very frustrating. And nevertheless, even if that's what they want, and I was supposed to come to some, I don't know, peace with that or whatever, I can't help the fact that they presented themselves in a way that I find now to be fundamentally dishonest. Right? Like, I can't help the fact that they beat me over the head with Jesus was the most important thing, and it's definitely true and definitely real. And like you said, you feel like he's part of the family that is going to be there at, a family reunion. And then the truth is, oh no, really, that really meant never ever talk about Jesus. Definitely don't ever ask questions about Jesus, right? Like, how is a person supposed to know that? You run around talking about how you're great, loving people, and you're just the most honest people, and you care about it. Okay, well then people are going to assume that you want to have honest conversations when someone genuinely thinks you're wrong. And they think you're going to be able to love them unconditionally, as you've been bragging about your unconditional love their entire fucking life. Oh, and it turns out that, again, that's just not true. And again, wait, what's the solution here? They should ignore that. Why? So you can remain comfortable in your... I don't know. I'm at a place, and it might change, but I'm at a place where just that mode just didn't work for me. It got to a point where I was talking to my psychiatrist about it and, like, telling them, this is the thing I suffer with every day. There's not a day that goes by that I am not immensely tortured by the fact that I wasn't actually able to have a sit down, honest, heart-to-heart conversation with my family about their religion. And I realized since then that, like, you're dealing with religious trauma. You're dealing with, and a real episode in your life. You're having a crisis of faith. And it is severely disappointing to have a crisis of faith and then have the most faithful people in your life, the people that introduced you to the faith, totally just shut that whole thing down. And yeah, that's what I'm coping with.
But remember, that goes both ways. If you reach them, right, you approaching the Gospels and the Bible with logic and patience and reason and honest investigation, and to them it proves it false, then you're taking it away from them. They're the ones who now have to suffer, if we want to use that term, to get through, okay, I'm now walking out of the fog of faith, and I have to stand in the sunlight, potentially by myself without my God, for the rest of my life. Can I do it? Do I have that kind of courage? It's like that, it reminds me of that, it's not a poem, really. I guess it's a story about footprints in the sand, where there's two sets of footprints on a beach, and then suddenly there's one, and whatever. The story ends with Jesus saying to the guy, when you see one set of footprints, that is when I carried you.
Right.
So in a way, believers have to face that. No, there were never two sets of footprints.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was just you.
Yeah.
The two footprints and the two sets of footprints in the sand is a parable.
Mm.
And I think that's what we're seeing when we read the Gospels. And though, from my perspective, I think to believers that ought to be extremely liberating, it isn't for most of them. When they view something, Jesus who spoke in parables, were better than to have a character who spoke in parables be a parable himself.
Yeah, I think
You know,
it's honestly, I think in many cases it's a lost cause. You know, some people come to some sort of peace with it. It's hard for me. It's also hard for me because I'm still in the backlash phase, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of and there always has been, right? Like even me saying like I I tried to build the bridges and start to have more conversations with my mother and right? That's me being the one to try to actually work on mending the relationship after damn near 20 years of our relationship not being anywhat near what it's supposed to be, right? Like, and that's what I mean. Like, I've always had this Jesus is more important than Jason thing. And I think for a lot of us, we probably have to come to terms with the fact that it's always going to be this way. And I think some of us can probably come to grips with that more so than others, but I'm still in the phase of dealing with them turning me over, feeling the pain of loss, right? The literal feeling of losing your family, who, by the way, is there. They're just like, they just don't fuck with you, right? And so, it's hard to do that now. Maybe 20 years down the road, I'll see it differently. But right now, it's still too fucked up. But yeah, let's get into some of this. Let's get into some of this footage, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm gonna grab something.
Go for it.
It's right here on my table.
You can listen. Yeah. All right. So first thing we got going is actually I want to skip this one because it's a Christian dude. Let's start here.
Stephen Furtick.
Let's start here. Let's start with this guy. How to tell your religious parents that you're an atheist.
Hey, playa, did you grow up in a religious household and just recently you started to move away from those beliefs? That could be a difficult conversation to have with your parents, and that's exactly what I'm Never Hot asked when they said, I live in a religious household and I don't feel religious. I'm pretty much an atheist now. I don't know what to say to my parents. Please help. Don't worry, having this conversation doesn't have to be as difficult as you think it is. So I want to share a few tips on how you can approach it without having the whole thing explode in your face.
This is the Just Beats, you're watching the Just Beat.
For those of you that are new here, my name is Josh, and every single Monday through Friday, I make videos sharing tips, ideas, and stories teaching you how to be your best self. And if you've recently become an atheist, then chances are you no longer believe in God like you used to. Whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing, we can put aside for now. The key piece to all of this is being able to express your new views to your family without being criticized and judged and shamed for them. And doing that can be really tough if you come from a religious household or even from a religious community. It's hard to kind of break out from the norm and kind of do your own thing without people kind of looking at you and going, what are you doing? I think growing and learning are natural parts of our human development. As we get older, we discover new ideas, and they end up challenging the old ones that we carried simply because we were taught them by our parents. It can be difficult for parents to see that because as they've also grown over the years, they've come to the beliefs that they have now after all their years of development. And once you get older, you feel like you have a more firm grasp in how the world works around you. So you're less likely to kind of change your beliefs or adapt new ones. So if you thought you would kind of just rationally explain your new beliefs to your parents and they would just turn around and go, yeah, that makes sense, it's not always going to be that simple. Instead of trying to disprove what they believe, try to find different elements within that belief that still coincide with your new ones. For example, if you're atheist, you might get asked the question, where do your morals come from though? And you could simply follow up with, I follow the golden rule. do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. The golden rule functions as a moral compass that has existed well beyond all religions. And here's the interesting thing, it's also found in all the religions. The simple values of being kind, being compassionate, and doing the least amount of harm to others is something that could be found in every single religion. So even if you're an atheist and you don't have a religion to believe in, those are still values that you can coincide with along with what your parents believe. Or you might get asked, are you concerned at all with the idea that you might not go to heaven and you might go to hell? From that, if you're an atheist, you can simply explain to your parents that you want to live your life and carry out your day-to-day in a way that would merit you going to heaven. And that means being a kind person, being compassionate, doing the right thing whenever you can. If your parents can see that the values you hold are ones that are going to uplift you in society, that are going to make you a better and kinder person, then as time goes on, that might be something that they can get behind. So how do you even start that conversation? I mean, what do you actually say? Well,
all right, what do you think so far?
Well, I'm picking up what he's laying down here. I think the idea of him not saying, "Oh, whether it's good or bad," the decision to be an atheist or whatever, the realization that you are an atheist. I think it's more of a realization than a decision. I think he's good because he's not trying to take a stand or telling you that you need to change where you are. I am adamant about the fact that when we confront our friends, family members, loved ones, strangers, we need to always keep in mind we're dealing with the person, and that person, Jesus might get them through the day. You know, though I utterly doubt the veracity of there ever having been a Jesus of Nazareth that walked on water, performed miracles, and was the natural born Son of God. That guy stops people from drinking, gets people off drugs, reunites families. So though I realize the ideas born of that concept that Jesus died for your sins for like 3 days, it can be healing, just as there are principles within Islam that do the same. I'm sure I can go to Buddhism and find the same, Scientology and find the same, where there are these bits of that religion that work to reform individuals that need it. In that respect, it may indeed be saving them. I can't throw that away. I know that power is there in those faith systems. You could also go see a psychologist and get the same thing, or talk to your best friends and get the same thing, or just do the self-work, read, what is it, Brooke Bell, is that lady's name? I forget what her name is. But you could read a self-help book and get the same thing. We do, in my opinion, have, and we should gladly accept, the obligation that at the end of the day, we want harmony. And I used to have this, it was my own phrase. I didn't hear it anywhere else, though. It probably was said for thousands of years. There is no harm in harmony. There just isn't.
So I don't know. I agree mostly, but I'm at a different place, and I want to qualify this by saying I don't think everybody's here, and go ahead, and a lot of people probably just think I'm an asshole, but I do recognize that I'm a difficult person to deal with, like, and I accept that. But I'm kind of on that MLK tip where eventually he gets to a point where, and again, I think people should really think about it, because this is something they might not agree. Like, don't let me just throw the name MLK out and you just think you got to go with it, right? But he got to a point where he spent a lot of his time and rhetorically he was very clear about the fact that he was getting to a point where he was more frustrated with white moderates than he was with outright racists, where he was, the sort of you know, weak understanding is more difficult to deal with than, you know, blind misunderstanding or whatever. I'm a person who benefited from, and sort of my reaction to the video too is, step one was pretty safe for me. For me, this video is about step one, and step one was like, how do you get people to acknowledge the fact that you're an atheist and be okay, right? And I just want to acknowledge that, like, that was fine, right? Like, my mom, my family, they know I'm an atheist. Like, that's why my grandparents stopped saying praise the Lord when they answer the phone when I call or whatever, right? Like, they're not these unreasonable people that can't accept that I am not a believer, right? I don't want to say that. And this is what I'm saying, I'm a difficult person to deal with, and people might think I'm an asshole. I wasn't satisfied with that. I wasn't comfortable with that. That became not enough for me. And I think it might be, and I even said to my mother, this is a change, right? It's a difference. I very much feel like it fits in my own way or whatever, in that coming out sort of process, to where there was a point where it was like, if the acknowledgement was, say, me telling my family that I'm gay, for instance, okay, you've accepted that I'm gay. That's great. Congratulations. You know, I really appreciate it, right? But it became not enough, because it became, if you're going to be a part of my life going forward, if you are going to continue to be in the proximity with me as I continue to grow and mature myself, I can't have you in my life if we have to stay away from the subject. You know I'm gay, but we can't talk about it. Or you know I'm gay, but we can't talk about how the way I was raised or the things I was taught or the messages I received came up, you know, harmed me, and I'm still having to recover from that trauma. Right, because that's who I am today, right? And so I just want to be clear, like, that's and right. I'm talking about step maybe 4, 5, and 6. It's when you're saying it's not enough to acknowledge that I'm an atheist. I needed to put atheism on the table. Go ahead.
Well, our relationships aren't about, all the time, a single aspect of ourselves, right? I talk to my family now. It almost never comes up that I'm an atheist. My brother Rick will say something now and again, and I almost look forward to it because he's such he's like if Jesus came down from heaven, and he would probably say to Rick, "Can you help me? Like, I need your help. You're super reliable." You know, you profess so easily. You're super reliable. So, our relationship, right, isn't about his faith. It isn't about my atheism. That's an aspect of him. Atheism is an aspect of me that rarely comes up in conversation. I would imagine someone who is a homosexual. Well, actually, I don't know. We probably have people in our audience we can ask. I don't know how often that topic comes up in family interactions. If someone is in relationship trouble, you know, like they're whoever their partner is, they're having a rough time. Maybe then it's an issue, and probably not the key issue, just part of an issue, or not. You know, if the person is a jerk to you, that needs to get handled. You need to get this person out of your life, or they need to change. One of the two. That has nothing to do with a sexual orientation. So I guess you'd have to take it on a relationship by relationship basis, but figure out what the problems truly are. The problems probably aren't a character aspect of, well, I guess I think that's the wrong term. The problem probably isn't sexuality, it's something else.
Well, sure. The problem,
and you need to deal with this something else.
Well, I think the problem, for me, the problem's abuse, And the problem is the abuser wanting to continue the relationship under the abusive paradigm. And you can make the relationship about that's why it's easy with other people. If I have a golf buddy who's a Christian, I don't care. I'm the type of person who it's probably going to be difficult to be a golf buddy with me, because if you tell me you're a Christian or bring up Christianity, I'm going to want to have a conversation with it because I have an issue with it. So he probably is not going to golf with me more than a couple times before they find somebody that feels emotionally safer to golf with. But in terms of dealing with family, the issue is they're usually so much the source of what you go through as an individual, right? How you see yourself, how you see the world. And so a lot of times it's difficult because you may be asking a person to ignore what was painful in the context of the relation of the person who caused that pain. And And I think it would be better if they could acknowledge that and work through it in a healthy way. The problem is their emotional adherence to the religion often stops them from realizing the consequences of that, right? So like my mom got to the point where she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry if you don't like the way you were raised, if you've got, if you think I indoctrinated you or whatever." And I'm like, look, it's not an issue. I think you did the best you could with the resources you had. But the issue is understanding how it's not going to work going forward, right? And I think that's where you run into problems, because they're basically trying to shut that conversation down so they can scurry off right back to the system that caused it in the first place. Like, in other words, I'm happy to say, let bygones be bygones. Everything in the past is water under the bridge. It wasn't really you. It was the, side effects of Christianity working in your life. But in order to do that, so you could get with me where I gotta go now, we're gonna have to talk about what Christianity did in our relationship. Otherwise, you're asking me to sweep it under the rug, and that's abusive. And it's not even on me at that point. It's just really not. It just is what it is, right? And sure, we could be the type of person to look the other way. But number one, I'm not a look the other type of way person. Two, these are the motherfuckers who raised me not to be a look the other way type of person. And I did it anyway, and it didn't work for me. Like, I already tried that. I can't survive like that, right? That's gonna have me thinking about jumping out a window too frequently. So I can't take that route right now. But it is important to people understand that you gotta assess, like you said, on a relationship by relationship basis where you're at. For me, again, and this is where it's difficult for my family. I wanted if I walk into a house and I see crosses all over the wall, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Right, I feel like I'm in a hostile environment. I'm an atheist. What kind of ritualistic place do I find myself in? If we sit down for a meal and you're like, all right, please grab your hands and bow your head and pray with me, we're going to have that conversation every single time, because I don't do that. And that's the so that's where I'm at. Like it's and I just wanted to be like, you're right and he's right. I'm in a different place, because here's what I'm about. I'm about atheists or second-class citizens. Right? At the end of the day, I'm beyond that. I don't care anymore. I genuinely don't care that these grown-ass people want to believe fairy tales. I think it makes them pathetic. And I mean that very literally. Like, it's the compromise. That's the compromise in me. If you want me to make a compromise with Christianity, here's the compromise. I will let you keep your faith, and I won't challenge you to leave your faith. Here's the trade-off. I'm now convinced you are pathetic, right? It's like a grown person with a security blanket. It's like, okay, I accept that you need to bring your security blanket to work with you every day. But yeah, when I write up the report about why someone has a security blanket, or I'm going to be like, so-and-so really can't cope without their security blanket. They really insist. Then you know what? They do get through their shift. And so we allow the blanket. Like, I don't know what else you want me to tell them. Right? But for me, it's about, I don't want to be a second-class citizen in my own life. So I'm not going to invite you into my home if I feel like I'm not willing to make my home a welcoming place for you. I'm not going to have dinner with you if I feel like I can't share a meal with you without subjecting you to a social experience that you're not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't want to be your source of support if when you come to me and say, I need help, I say, well, brother, I'm going to lift you up in prayer, rather than, brother, how much is it going to take to get rid of your problem, and how much of that can I send to you? And so that's where I'm at. I realize grown-ass Jason still needs a real-ass family. Now, is that going to be the Priesters, and that'll be my mom's side of the family? Is that going to be the Bundys? That's my dad's side of the family. Is that going to be, a feeling of family and support amongst my professional support network? Is it going to be my found family in terms of, YouTube, social media, the Gather Gang? That's the answer. But, the negotiation with people in all of those spaces, right, is trying to figure that out, right? Like, and so that's where I'm at with my relationship, and I hope people hear that. And I just I'm just putting it out there. It's not the right way to believe. It's not the wrong way. It's just genuinely where I'm at in this journey, and that's the motivation. It's I was feeling like I was being quiet about my own discomfort in my own life. It was frustrating. But yeah, you can still be grateful for the meal, for sure. All right, let's see what else he's got to say, man. This has been a good
In that
episode.
case, I would simply explain to your parents something like this. Hey, as time has gone on, I think my religious beliefs have kind of shifted in a way where I'm more focused on being a good person and maybe tied less to the mystical aspect of it all. Let them know that while you might still be curious, you're not exactly interested in following any beliefs that come from any set doctrine. You're more on a path of discovering who you are, and you're doing it in a way that you want to carry yourself forward to be your best self. And no matter what, you're still going to get into arguments or disagreements from time to time. If you come from a super religious family, it's going to be really hard for them to accept that you're no longer following what everyone else is. Don't be so focused on trying to fix other people or change their beliefs. Really focus on building yourself up. That's where you can have the biggest impact on this world, by creating a belief structure that can uplift you and eventually also uplift the people around you to where they're more kind, they're more compassionate, and they're more considerate of other people. What do you think though? Do you have beliefs of any kind that don't necessarily align with your parents? Are you afraid to talk to them about it? Leave your comments down below and we'll talk about it. Now, this may not be something you want to talk about in public, so if you want, you can always shoot me a DM over on Snapchat or Instagram. I do my best to answer as many messages as I can. And on that note, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, I really like that. I thought he did a good job with that. What are your thoughts?
I think what he said about saying, I'm switching over to less the religious, I'm rephrasing a bit, less the religious, more the journey into the self, more to learning about myself. I think that's fantastic, because it is not terrifying to someone who is hardcore religious, hey Scotty, Jesus man, kind of Jesus has to be the lead focus of all our lives. If you don't believe, there are dire consequences where you will end up burning alive in hell forever and ever, because God won't like you anymore, because you didn't want to play with Jesus or whatever it is. So I think that's an excellent way to transition into later being able to say in conversation, oh no, I'm an atheist now. I don't believe in a God of any kind. And I think that's less of a blow the way he said it. Because I just said to my mom, I don't believe in God anymore. And I pretty much said it that way to my brothers and sister. Like, I don't believe in God anymore. I'm an atheist. But I'm comfortable saying that. Not everybody's going to be.
I think that's I think that's so good the way you said it, though. It really just, cut straight to the point.
Well, I am reminded, as you say that, of the movie As Good as It Gets, which was so well written. The title is spoken in a scene where Jack Nicholson's character is in the psychiatrist's office or psychologist's office. And he says to the people in the room, in the waiting room, what if this is as good as it gets? And then there's this panic after he says that, because what if it just doesn't get better? What if it's just always going to be a bit of a mess? And for most people, I think life probably is, most of the time, there's a bit of a mess going on that you don't necessarily deal with very well. And I think out and out saying to your friends or family, yeah, I'm an atheist, it can cause that in them. Because again, as I've said, Pocket Locker, we have to remember, for believers, even if their faith is strong, their evidence is weak. It's weak, and so many of them. I'm not trying to poke fun at them. I'm not poking fun at them.
Sure.
They're so sincere, which is beautiful, and they're so dedicated, which can, depending on how far they take it, which can also be beautiful. But we don't have evidence for the Hebrews being captive in those numbers in Egypt. You might in Babylon, but you don't in Egypt. We don't have evidence for the worldwide flood of Noah, right?
Most definitely.
Now, we can say, yes, but they do. Now, that doesn't mesh with history, right? It doesn't mesh with fact. But these are foundational myths to their faith. So what we believe about them, or what we disbelieve, doesn't matter to them. It's what they believe. And by the way, if you're wrestling with this with someone of the faith, I want to give you the Amanda defense. Now, let me tell you who that is. I've mentioned her before. Amanda is this friend I have who's Jewish. And 1,000 years ago, when I was a Christian, I was trying to convert Amanda because she's such a wonderful person, Why wouldn't she want to be a Christian and totally upgrade from Judaism? And I mentioned to her, like, well, Amanda, the Bible says if you don't believe in Jesus, you'll go to hell. And she, so brilliant, so wonderful, says, is that what you believe? Real simple, right? This is my friend. I love her.
Right.
This is my friend who helped me establish the career I have today and at that time. So I respect her. This is someone who was trying to help me become a writer in Hollywood. Fail. She clearly was interested in me succeeding. We are good friends, great friends. And she said that to me. And I had to reconcile how much I honored and respected and loved my friend.
Right.
versus what clearly would be unjust from my perspective for God to do. I would have to, as I sat there I was in my SUV. If you need one, the Honda Element's probably one of the best ones. I was sitting there processing what she said to me. And I couldn't agree with the Bible. I couldn't agree that it was just to make my friends suffer forever, simply because though she can buy into the whole Moses thing, there's no way a guy was walking on water, this ancient wizard, my words, not hers, was roaming around the Levant, healing people and making fish meals. It just didn't happen. So that is something you can just gently put to them. Is that just? Is that truly just?
Yeah, it's interesting. I asked my mom if she thinks I deserve to go to hell. And she said no. It was actually the time that she gave me the clearest, simplest, most direct answer to a question about her faith.
Okay. And credit. Then
yeah.
How can you love someone who thinks that way?
That's the question. Yeah, that's a question.
A God who has that MO,
and it's scarier than that. It's the worship of him, right?
If you didn't, yes. Hey God, I'm giving you 10%.
Right, because you love your fiance, but you're not going to worship her.
Well, in case she's listening, I've done it before.
But I think, but you know what I mean. That's all I was trying to say. Is that it's that extra? It's beyond love, right? It's obsession. It's devotion.
Yeah,
it's the all of that. Yeah.
My love and respect and admiration for my fiance is healthy.
That's perfect within a healthy boundary. That's the perfect distinction. Yeah.
We're not at the point where she could ask me to commit a crime, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Anything for you.
If you wrote a song about it, it'd be cute, not odd.
It would be It wouldn't make people go, should we call someone? This isn't right. These lyrics are disturbing. Isn't it beautiful? No. But I'll say this. I guess one of the key things to keep in mind is when you use the Amanda defense, you're kind of seeing what the person you're talking to is made out of and how they view your relationship. So your mother didn't think that it's proper for God to send you to hell. I didn't think it was proper that Amanda be sent to hell just because she didn't believe in Jesus. So what's God doing for having these rules? Those aren't good rules. And if my God can't be better than me, right? If my God can't make better decisions than me, then why call him God? Absolutely. I don't care how much power he has. I don't care.
I don't care how much power he has. Absolutely.
He's wrong.
Look at the trees.
I'll compare him to Trump. I'll compare him to Trump. Trump has lots of money. He has lots of influence. But when he's wrong, he's not right. He's wrong.
100%. 100%.
And yet we see there, and I'm not beating up on Donald Trump. We see in our society, there are people who have blind allegiance to him. And they don't care who gets stepped on. They don't care who gets abused. They don't care who gets ripped off. That's their guy. And you'd better not say anything wrong about him. And you damn sure better not challenge what they believe and make them give up their double standard, which is what a lot of religious people have, right? Well, if it's reasons sufficiently good for God, is that the reason to wipe out all but 8 people on the planet? Is that the reason to go slaughter all the Amalekites? Is that the reason to go kill the Midianites? Is that the reason, to drive these people out of their land using wasps? Is that the reason to that Jesus and his pals are going to come back on horseback in the 21st century or whenever it's supposed to be, because this is the hour, right? The hour is at hand, and slaughter people who don't believe.
Right.
The reasons.
Yeah, I mean, that's another good one.
At bedrock.
Yeah,
at bedrock, it fails to be reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think that's we have to come from there. They think, some of them, like they have moral superiority.
Right.
They don't.
Right.
In simply asking a question like the Amanda defense, and simply asking a question like that, they can realize it isn't what they hoped it would be. It isn't as good or strong or as wonderful as what they want it to be, because that failed or successful sinner, right? That wretch, as they are taught to call themselves, sitting there has to realize that they have outdone their own God. So what good is he? In you can read things like, it's not Jubilees, it's not Maccabees, I don't think, but in the Bible, in I believe it's Jeremiah, I could be wrong about that. It talks about how a person can go into the woods and get some wood, use it for their purposes, and have some scrap left over, and then they whittle away at it, and they make a god, and they make sort of a shrine to it, and then they go ahead and they offer prayers and worship to the god that they just carved. Like, you made this. I would submit the Bible, if it's paper, used to be a tree. Someone else has gone and done all the work for you, and you just picked it up, you bought it, it was given to you, you took it from the drawer in the hotel, which is totally legit to do if it's a Gideon Bible. And now you're looking at it and you're idolizing what you see in it. But it's fabricated. Just the same. Your God is not the same God as your neighbor's God. It won't be the same God as your children's God, or grandpa's God, or grandma's God. You probably see that in your own family pocket locker. These people don't believe in the same God. They have variations of that God. We have so many denominations of Christianity in the United States. I've heard the numbers in the thousands, which I don't get how they get there, but maybe there's 10 I could identify on my own. Maybe there's 10, which is 9 too many from a religion that's supposed to be, right, the ultimate, the solution. It's not.
I think another
but
one.
To them it is.
So another one is, because you said, like, do you think I deserve to go to hell? Mm-hmm. Another one that kind of came up is, what do you think should happen to me if Jesus came back tomorrow? Right.
Well, he's going to get my brother Rick to help him. So he's going to show up at Rick's house.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think it serves a similar function, right? Because one is, do you think I deserve to go to hell? But I think
that's a good challenge.
To me, it's just because I think Christians don't also think about the end even of the biblical narrative, right? Which is, do you think Jesus is coming back? Yeah, oh yeah, I do. All right, well, cool. Well, I'm a non-believer. He come back tomorrow. What do you think happens to me? Because it puts them in, I just think, a very similar position, because it's the same thing, right? Judgment and potentially facing the judgment of God, and where do I go in the ultimate kingdom or whatever.
Now, I think that's a great question, and I'd encourage anyone who is going to ask that question to reread the epistles and the book of Revelation. Here's why. If you can get to know that material better than they do, you have every advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you can say, setting aside the book of Jubilees, which tells you that there are these holes in the ground in Duda El. And Duda El is a real place on earth. it's a real place. You can go there, right?
Yeah.
There's supposed to be these holes in the ground where that's where the souls are going to go, and that's where people are going to be judged from and tortured, and that's where the devil and his angels are. Like that's the pits are for them. You know, there's an explanation there that you don't get if your Bible doesn't have jubilees in it.
Yeah,
So there's stuff you.
I was just gonna say I have the exact opposite advice because
you do?
I hate the Bible and reading it is torture. So
it's torture.
It depends on how much of a Bible nerd. But I think they're probably on your side. I think it's mostly Bible nerds here, so I think you're probably good.
So you take that, and then unlike saying, only if all I have is, and this is all Amanda, and she knew me well enough. This is all she needed, because I'm going to defend her. I know her better than I can know God. Do I think she deserves that? If you know all these other details, you can start listing them. What that does psychologically, it lets that person who's telling you do this to avoid perishing in hell and dying the second death and all this stuff, when you know that better than they do, they realize how little they actually know about it.
Mm.
Well, where's that? Where does it say that? And they can look it up and fact check you in real time. And that'll help them realize how thin, how delicate their belief is.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay,
you're good.
Oh, well, let me just say,
yeah, go for it.
Leaving aside the transformative power of believing in Jesus and that you can get rid of your sins and reform yourself, reform your life and all this stuff, okay? Because that can work. But they realize that there's nothing else there. It's all whipped cream. There's no pie. It's just whipped cream in a tin. There's no crust. There's no cherry, no apple, nothing. It's all just whipped cream. And it's not the substance that they hoped for, right?
Yep.
Is not there. Substance they hope for is intentionally used. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say it's that's kind of the thing to me is it's definitely true that it gives you a much greater place to start those conversations from. I think for so many of us, we already know it so much better than most Christians, but I realize that that's not necessarily true for people. And so I just wanted to say if you do it and it feels like work, I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? Is that it shows that you are really willing to invest in the conversation. And I think it does shame them to an extent to realize that they don't know their own stuff as well as people who don't believe it. But I wanted to touch on this. So Trees said earlier that his mom said that she would sacrifice him if God asked her to, but God wouldn't ask her to. I remember being in church. I was actually in church with my dad one time when this was preached about, and I didn't ask him about it. I don't think my dad's a strong believer, and I say that as a compliment. But I did hear a story recently about a guy who asked his dad the same question, and his dad had the same response. And I was thinking maybe it's the type of thing you talk about on Father's Day, but it's a relevant question to ask a mother as well. And it just shows you the scariness to me of where people are at with religion. What obligation do you have to help people out of religion, right? Do you think there's a point at which not challenging someone's religion becomes like withholding medicine?
That's a fantastic question, and that interesting problem of, hey, Mom, if God asked you to sacrifice me, would you do it? I would say this: stop eating your mother's cooking, because you don't know now, do you?
You don't know, yeah, right.
Confidence gone.
Right,
If you see
right.
a hole, if you go to visit and there's a hole in the backyard and it's roughly, if you can fit in it, don't eat the food. Don't drink the
Yeah,
water.
yeah.
I think if the mother's not joking and she's sincere, right? Obviously, I'm joking. If the mother's not joking and she's sincere, you can see how dangerous the religion is, because we know there are mothers and fathers who will deny their child medical treatment because God is supposed to heal that child. The congregation has prayed and laid on hands to that poor little girl or that poor little boy. Excuse me. And they're supposed to get better. The Bible says, was it Mark 16 says it's supposed to be that way. And we have faith. There may be plenty of good times to have faith, where faith is the appropriate thing to do when you don't have options, right? If faith is your only option, I get it. But a lot of researchers, nurses, doctors, orderlies, other medical professionals have worked very hard to be good at what they do. And I've had a front row seat a few times for that, right?
Right.
It is wrong for that child to have parents that won't take that child to the hospital. My neighbors have kids. I adore their kids. And if they were like, oh, no, we're going to just lay hands and pray for her, I would be calling up a friend of mine who's a police officer and saying, is there anything I can do? Because that child needs medical care. And they can fix what's wrong with her, or they can fix what's wrong with him. Is there anything I can say? Is there any report I can file? Is there anything you can do to get that child seen to? Because that child deserves to be here next year, or next month, or next week, because things get rather serious. Faith, there is a dangerous side to faith, and maybe that's another episode in the future, but there is a dangerous side, right? People will kill strangers in the name of their faith.
But I think isn't it inherently dangerous in the sense of, like, I don't know, like I just think even the stuff we've become, I think desensitized maybe is the word I'm looking for, to. I hear people all the time, even like this politician, like there was a politician the other day. He gets up in the, I think, Texas House or whatever, and he's he's really going off about the audacity of the Texas government to be, removing gun restrictions instead of passing more. But the whole thing was just this sort of Christian grandstanding, clearly in violation of separation of church and state. And it's all like, I believe in prayer and da 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 da. And the take was pretty based. I mean, he was on point. I don't have any problem with the message, but it was just an example of, but wait, actually prayer doesn't work. And why do we keep accepting people, promulgating this idea that is actually quite anti-scientific? And why do we keep allowing people to violate the separation of church and state by, using appeals to their religion in public discourse? Why? What about tithing? Like, my family tithes. Like, it's hard for me when people talk about, well, if your religion isn't harming you, I'm like, to me, as soon as you get to, you believe strong enough to give 10% of your income to the church, I consider that to be a serious, detrimental effect. And that's why this is hard for me, because really, as much as people probably think my thing seems like it's me super kicking my family or beating up on my folks, and they seem like nice, loving Christian people, I just won't leave them alone. At some level, it's just hard to watch. Like, and that's why I talked about that story about my mom asking me about the Creation Museum. It's hard to watch the people in your family put themselves through this whole thing. That's the thing for me. You feel like because they kind of supported you, having enough to become the person you became, and you feel like you have some obligation to try to pull them out of intellectual poverty is maybe a good way of thinking about it. And so it's really it's hard. I mean, I think that's what a lot of us are feeling, right? I don't think most of us. I think for most of us, it's somewhere there's a spectrum, and maybe it shifts at times what your priority is. But your priorities usually, I imagine, somewhere between I want to be able to have healthy, productive relationships with my friends and family in the fullness of being an atheist, including them being able to, relate to me differently so that they continue to really function productively in my life. And maybe at other times, it's the sort of sympathetic or empathetic side of you that realizes you've sort of gone from a misguided worldview to at least a more well-informed perspective. And it's hard to watch people around you not grow in that same way. It's like kind of Uncle Bobby says, sometimes they say you don't realize how poor you are till you go back to your own neighborhood. I think that's what people experience intellectually, right?
Mm. Well, that could be the case. And I as I've mentioned earlier in this podcast, I think Christians have it rough because they don't have, their evidence doesn't have the strength that they think it does.
100%.
They don't. And then there are people who will abuse themselves with their religion. They will. They're too hard on themselves. What is it? The faith, is it in Jeremiah? The faith, your faith is like filthy rags. You're like filthy rags. Really? You want to damage somebody psychologically? Start there.
Yeah.
So what the Bible does well is it creates in an individual, it may create in an individual a sense of self-loathing. What is it? Who said it? It tells you you're sick and then it sells you the cure. I think that it's received a lot of criticism like that, and it does that. Why I think people are smarter than we give them credit for, or they give themselves credit for, because most people who are Christian barely.
Uh-oh. All right, you're back.
Yeah, that wasn't God. That was a glitch. Gather.
Glitch of the gaps.
Yeah, and here's how we know it wasn't God. Most Christians know that, the evidence in the Bible is rather thin in a lot of places. And so they don't engage with the material. They statistically don't read the Bible because I think the religious communities that they have can be wonderful places to be. There's people for your children to play with. There's a lot of older people who are insightful and very helpful and very kind. You might be able to get a job through them. Like, there clearly are benefits to the community aspect of it. But the part where it tells you you're a worthless sinner, you deserve hell, you're not that good on your own, you need God to make anything around you work, all that stuff is hard to hear. And then if you're reading it, you're supposed to get in the word daily, right? And read through it. And as G-Man says, read your Bible and do what he says. Like, oh, G-Man, man, you'd have been dead a long time ago. They would have stoned him to death for no more than how he speaks, right? He wouldn't have been able to maybe go to the temple because of the shape of his nose. There's all these other things that could be, there could be problems with that are so easy to ignore. And when I believed, I ignored things I read because I don't want to feel bad about that. I never wanted to stone anyone to death. The Old Testament clearly commands me, right? I'm part of the community. It says, this person who does this or this person who does that, you're supposed to stone them to death. I'm utterly unwilling to kill someone for a God. Utterly unwilling. I kind of think that speaks badly about me if I were to do it. But again, there are people out there who buy into that mindset that it is necessary. Think of it. The Bible has a story about a guy who picked up sticks on the Sabbath, and they put him in ward because they were trying to decide what to do with him because they're supposed to kill him for picking up sticks so he could have a fire. Are we serious?
Mm-hmm.
Are we serious? That's why when people try to excuse people in the Old Testament, they never really did that. I'm like, don't be so sure. Don't be so sure. Because they wanted to kill a guy for picking up sticks. So
yeah. So there's something here that I wanted to touch on, which is I'm learning about myself that I'm pretty uncompromising in certain things, in the regard that the same way I'm trying to learn what it means to be anti-racist, and I'm not always sure what it means in terms of my take or my opinion or my stance on things, but I do know I'm unrepentant in being anti-racist, right? And then similarly, I'm unrepentant about being anti-theist, and also I think mesotheist, like where I think it's immoral to worship God or something like that. It's like people who do like, no, we actually are God haters. Like that's an accurate description of how we feel. But I'm trying to throw some light on where I think there might be productive ground that even I can stomach in a relationship with a Christian. And to do so, I'm doing two things. I'm going to flip my perspective a bit to sort of think what I want as a Christian, what I would want from the Christians in my life, right? So I guess I was talking about what I think they should give me rather than how I should approach them, right? And the other thing is I'm going to draw from my experience with the church, my participation with churches, right? Mm-hmm. So my participation with churches usually comes from twofold. Like one is professionally, I think it's important that evolutionary biologists go over there, like go where go where you can interact with the students who are not going to come into your classroom, basically. But the goal for me, more from a secular or atheist perspective, because those is totally different, is to be understood. And what I meant by that, normally with people involved in the church, was if we started our relationship where if I asked you, why do you think I'm an atheist, or why do you think people are atheists, and you said things like, you just want to sin, you were hurt by the church, you just hate God, you know Jesus is true, and whatever that is, right? If we could progress to a place where you say, and this is why it touches on what you said, you're an atheist because you're not convinced by the evidence that supports the claims of the religion. Mm-hmm. I would more than happily hold hands and continue down the road towards understanding. In other words, what I'm really getting at is, if I had a Christian in my life, parent, in this case, let's talk about a parent, like my mother, say for instance, what I really would be happy to hear is them communicate a genuine understanding. And Derek on Mythvision spoke about this. He called it basically granting us the fellowship, right? Grant us the fellowship that we were sincere believers, right? And we're no longer sincere believers because we're unconvinced by the evidence. I cannot tell Christians how immensely beneficial to our relationships it would be if they did that. Because the current feeling of myself and I'm sure many other atheists who have Christians in our lives is the way they treat us is completely invalidating to our life experience. And that hurts because it betrays a lifetime of Christianity for most of us. And that is very painful. Whereas if they could simply grant us the fellowship, like instead of seeing me as atheist, whatever, see us, I always say this, I always want people in my church, I would say, if you don't necessarily even have to see me as an atheist, I'd be totally cool if you just saw me as a fellow Christian who struggles with doubt. The same way y'all all sit around a circle and talk about your sin struggles, and this person, if they were being honest, would be like, I struggle with being faithful to my wife because I lust after my neighbor, and I struggle with not stealing because I cheat on my taxes, and
or I pay my tithe and I have 10% less money.
Whatever it is, right? Right? They all are happy to identify their sin struggles, and they're all happy to accept one another. Oh, I still, I accept. Yeah, man, it's that lust is a tough one. It's always, hey, money's tight, right? Like, if you could literally start by granting atheists, like, validation that we were legitimate Christians and that we're simply unconvinced by the evidence, that'd be cool, because then I'd be happy to grant that you're still a Christian, maybe because that element of faith is more important to you than whatever pursuit of the evidence I've undertaken, right? And we could maybe have that conversation later, or maybe even not, right? But it at least allows me to feel understood, right? And then I think from there I can get, because that's where I want to get for most people, is like where I can get comfortable. And I think my mom like gets this. I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out. But I think she even gets the aesthetic, right? She gets that, symbolism and signs and aesthetics and environments and all of that stuff can play a role in making me feel unwelcome, right? And if you can understand that that's from, internalized messaging about the religion, which you again now understand that I just don't think there's evidence for, right? You can understand where I'm feeling, I think, in a way where you understand at least that I'm not going through this journey to attack your faith, right? That's what sucks about this. You're trying to relate to people, number one, like, hey, maybe you want to have this conversation about some of these things I've been, learning about this faith that was so important to our relationship. Oh, no? Cool. Well, I at least would love it if you could, understand, where I'm at in my personal journey without them feeling like you're trying to attack them.
Can I tell you what I think you said?
Go ahead.
You are sincere in your belief. I am sincere in my disbelief. I am now going to explain to you how you can relate to me. And then I need you to explain how I can relate to you.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully. Now, I think the issue becomes there's still a power dynamic there, and I think that's something people have to wrestle with. So I think, like, in a lot of cases, there's a need for them not to talk about it, right? There's a discomfort with, you know, certain things, right? And so, you know, that just might be something that you may or may not have to negotiate later, right? That's where the you know, that's kind of what, like, it's like it's similar to anything else, I think, in your family. Like, speaking of coming out, like, there was a time, so for instance, I was in a poly relationship. I felt like I could talk. I felt like my mother and my family knew that I was dating multiple people, right? So you're like, okay, cool, that's good to go. Glad that you can wrap your head around that. But then I felt like my mom uninvited me to her wedding. All right, well then that's right. That's where there's again this, like, right, because that's where how do you need me to relate to you, and how do I need you to relate to me? That's where it might, like you said earlier, you might have to accept that it's going to continue to be messy for a while, right? Because
there's still the protection mechanism.
Yeah,
there's still the protection mechanism,
right?
So the protect there's this where you're ready to fight, or you flee.
Yeah, right.
The protection mechanism may never go away. And I think you have to understand that that person is in self-preservation mode, just like you, just like me. Excuse me. And so you don't know what their methods are going to be. But that's part of that communication process. How do I relate to you? I've told you how you relate to me.
Yeah.
How do I relate to you? Because if it's a friendship, if it's like a romantic relationship, if it's family, you have to look out for each other within those structures. And you're not always going to intuit what to do. It's silly, right? My fiance and I, she speaks multiple languages. I really only speak English. There was a time I could speak to you in a little conversational Bulgarian or Kartulad maybe. But now, no. I don't live in those places anymore. So I can't do it. So for her, she speaks Spanish and English. She uses phrases when she speaks in English that I don't use. When I was in Georgia, my friends laughed at me because I would speak to them in Kartulad the best I could. And they would say, nobody says those words anymore. I'm like, well, they're in my book. They're in my book. There will be, if I talk to their grandparents didn't miss a beat. Like, those are words we still use. I don't know what the kids say, that you know, kids your age, they don't do that. But I think we have to understand that this is part of the communication process, that relating. It's part of the communication process. That process can break down. That process can be mended. That process can be liberating. Because once you understand, I want to encourage everybody to look up Eckhart Tolle, Tolle, maybe it's Tolle, I don't know, and pain bodies. Like, just go on YouTube and search for it. His discussion about this is brief and brilliant. He says this, and this is all in reference to relating. You could be in conversation with someone or in a relationship with someone, and then you bring up whatever the topic is. I'm gonna say a flat tire on a car, right? He would say something more emotional than that. You will notice this person that you've been talking to, their whole tone changes. And the way that they are dealing with you in the conversation from that point on becomes more intense. It's almost like they're angry with you. No, it isn't. They are angry with you. You have not consciously said anything that should be upsetting.
Right.
But at some point in the past, that person had an experience. And maybe at the center of that was a flat tire. And that incident surrounding the flat tire caused them pain. And that pain has not been properly healed. And now their attitude about that is being thrust at you, and you don't deserve the venom that you're getting from this person. You don't deserve their folded arms. You don't deserve their bouncy crossed leg where it's clear like they can't wait to get out of your presence for whatever reason. You're now horrible, you're awful, and how dare you? You've unlocked something that person managed to suppress right until you unknowingly brought it up. Within the bond that we have with our moms, other people, there may be hundreds of those things or thousands of those things. And for the most part, we deal well with those. But there may always be the ones where we don't, right? They don't handle it well. We're fine with it. We don't handle it well. They're fine with it. Why can't you get over it? Why don't you get it? Right? That was 20 years ago. That was 30 years ago. That was 40 years ago. You were a baby. We had to tell you that story. You obviously don't remember. Well, I know now because you told me.
Right.
It offends you. It upsets you. You still have to, if you want to look at it in the terms of a solar system, we're revolving around each other all the time. We're spinning, that sort of thing. And we have to keep it all together. There is a balance there, and it can be struck, and it can be beautiful. And yes, from time to time, there's these perturbations. It gets disturbed.
Yeah, sometimes you got to push people out further in the orbit.
But that's true, right? But that is literally true, because if there are those people who are somewhat toxic to you because they always pick on you or something of that nature, right? Or maybe they have a habit like, okay, my neighbors, I used to be at their house a lot. They got a cat. Well, I'm allergic to cats. So their cat likes to come in my yard and like it'll watch me do things out there in my yard. I don't care. I got all this open air. I'm fine. When I walk into their kitchen, I got about 30 seconds before I need to be running out of that house. I could even wear a mask. It doesn't matter. My body's like, this is not a good environment for you. You have to step outside. So most of our interactions have become, we're outdoors interacting. I'm visiting them and I'm staying outdoors. You know, that's just how it has to be. You don't have to ditch the friendship, but maybe the location changes or the ground rules change. Their cat can walk right up to me and start circling around me. The cat's fond of me, and I like cats. I just can't be around most of them. So I had to move myself away because I'm not going to add one more allergy problem on all my other problems. But the people that I interact with, I didn't let that go.
So I'm kind of like Lena, who said I have no friendships with Christians, only conflict. And that was a part of this to me. It was like I got to a point in my life when I genuinely didn't have Christians, a lot of like Christians that I consider friends, and I wanted I kind of that's a thing that's I'm still dealing with. I think there's a way in which Christians fundamentally struggle to remain Christians while genuinely relating to non-believers, and so I do feel like a certain sense of that, like in this, just even in the way, like I feel like even most of the people I participated in church with, like there was just real limits to those friendships because of the differences in how we see the world. And Lena said that they're not sincere. They know that giving atheists their due means giving up the goose. And what's been lurking in the back of my mind as we have this conversation is, ironically, in this way, the people uniquely prepared to do this with us is actually apologists. and it makes me cringe to have to say that, but I think about it this way. Like you said, the evidence is very thin for most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of having to acknowledge that a genuine Christian is no longer a Christian because they don't believe there's enough evidence to warrant being a Christian is like traumatizing. And in my experience, most of them just for whatever reason can't do it. But not to say that that characterizes everyone, but I do know apologists do this all the time. Like you always hear apologists saying, "No, I think you're a sincere person, and I just think you have your doubts because you remain unconvinced." Da, da, da. Now the ironic thing is, I think they're the least honest people about their faith, right? But they are. For whatever they've made themselves, they've become desensitized to the arguments, right? So they're comfortable with the arguments. They're comfortable understanding naturalism and that you don't, think the supernatural is a thing, and they get that you even think there's no, that their experiences don't count as evidence. Like they're cool with all of that. It all seems to go in one ear and out the other. So they seem to be really disingenuous in a sense about the sincerity of their faith, because you're like, how are you still a Christian if you're aware of all of these issues?
You understand all those
right?
things,
But they are willing to sit there with you and acknowledge that you are not a believer because you don't buy it, which is kind of ironic.
Well, the apologist has it tough, right? Because they have to live in a way, they have to live in two worlds. And I think a lot of them stick to their arguments because they don't want the world to be a worse place. And they think without Christianity, it will be. Well, my argument for that is real simple. If someone is a murderer, will God forgive them? And if they accept Jesus Christ and become a Christian? Yes. If I never become a Christian, if I know about Christianity, read the Bible, never become a Christian, because I think it's, the stories in the Bible are so much hogwash. Few of them might be true, but it's basically hogwash. Will I go to hell? Yeah. Did I ever murder? If I never murdered anybody, I'll still go, right? Yeah. Christianity says, regardless of your sins, except for denying the Holy Spirit, right? Regardless of your sins, you can be forgiven and you can enjoy eternity in paradise. When you're telling people that from the time they're very small, what goes on in their mind is, but I'm ultimately accountable to God, which means I essentially can get away with this. Whatever they're doing, they can get away with it, which is one of the reasons I think we see so many Christians, and they're not the only ones. I'm not picking on Christians, but they can be super nasty to people. They can do super awful things because they can wash their hands of it in the blood of Jesus Christ. And it's okay. Look, I repented for my sin. Well, are you going to repent again next week? Sure, for the same stuff. Okay.
That's exactly the irony of what I feel like I'm going through with my family and the Christians in my life, is that exact feeling that there's a permissiveness to be even crueler that they don't realize, because again, they'll turn you over to God, right? Their thing is, that's there's discordance, and now it's in God's hands, and God, you and God will get right eventually, right? Which is actually more neglect and abuse from them, but they're counting on, in the end, no matter what happens, as long as they stay right with God, they're good to go. So it really is a problem that I think for those of us that have trouble with religious families, this contributes to it, because we deal with a scary lack of accountability on both sides. They're standing in the stead of God on their team, and then on our team, they're turning us over to a God that literally can't help us, but in the interim, they're no longer helping us because we don't share that allegiance any longer. It is really tough, and I think it's why Mother's Day is probably a great day for a lot of people, but I think for a lot of atheists, it's probably a tough day.
Let me read something to you. This is from the book of Revelation, chapter 22. I'm going to start early. Just to give you some context, Revelation 22:8. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed them to me. But he said to me, you must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers, the prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God. Okay, that's what it says. Okay. Verse 10. And he said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. And here's where your parents are. Okay, here's where your mom is. And here's where a lot of Christians are. Let the evildoer still do evil. Let the filthy still be filthy. And let the righteous still do right. And let and the holy still be holy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jesus is going on, behold, I am coming soon and bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done. I'm the Alpha and Omega, the first and last, the beginning and the end. Okay, fine. So, there's that. I'm going to go ahead and continue my Christian walk, and I'm going to just let you guys, right, enjoy your reprobate minds. If more Christians embrace that, I'm going to just let you in. You are the way you are. I'm going to stay right with God, get my robes washed in the blood and all that stuff. The world would be a better place. It actually would be a better place, because the power to persecute others would go unused by them, right? Well, because you are this way, because you believe that, because you don't do as we do.
Well, that's if they stop trying to oppress us on a systematic level. But
that's what I'm saying. If they just followed that, because what it's saying, let them be.
But that's not helpful. But that's not helpful in a personal level where we're talking about there. It's like kind of, it's more. You grow up with whatever your support system is, and that support system should continue unchanged by the fact that you're an atheist. And so it would be and so when because I'm just trying to distinguish. Yeah, we want them to leave us alone in terms of, bodily autonomy and social laws. But what I'm talking about on interpersonal cruelty is them not, withholding their support, and it's all types of support, right? Any emotional, social, just being around, encouraging you. They should not change any of that because you're not a believer any longer. And the fact is they do, right? Like, I think for so many of us, it's like just everything changes. Like you're not celebrated anymore. They don't show interest in you. They don't want to talk to you about the things that are going on in your life. They're not, and this is what I mean. It's like the coming out. It's like you're okay. It's like a parent who they accept that their son is gay, but they don't ever want to talk about your romantic life because you might talk about gay sex or what's not that would even be something you talk about with your parents, but that's an excuse to not bring it up, right? When what it feels like for you is, I don't have the typical parental support that a heterosexual person might have when it just comes to, hey, me and my partner are having a tough time, and I want to lean on the relationship history of my parents to help me get through this, or there's me and my partner trying to figure out what we're going to do for the holidays, and I want to make sure that hey, I want to make sure I can come home but I want to make sure I can, you know, come home as myself and bring my partner with me, right? And that's that's where it's going to be different for everybody. But that's what I mean in terms of, so oftentimes they accept that your identity changes, but to them that just means your label has changed. The problem is the relationship changes.
Hold on. I gotta jump in.
Go for it. Go for it. I'm done.
I think the label does change and your identity does not. So I'm gonna the way I use those terms, right?
Sure.
If I'm wearing this gray hat, gray and blue hat, and that's different than me wearing this.
Right.
So my identity is me with no regard to the hat. Now, this is a label. This is another label. And I've probably got, this is not a joke, 50 more hats in this house.
No, I'm agreeing. I'm saying that's how it should be, but I'm saying a lot of times that's how it isn't. And when it's not, that's the difference, right? Because I'm not going to not co-host the show with you because you wear a different hat, right? But, you know, when you sometimes tell people in your life that you're not a believer, they accept that you're not a believer, but the relationship then changes. And that's the reality. And that's been the unfortunate experience for a lot of us.
I guess I'm lucky enough, or I'm naive enough not to see the change. Right? I don't see the change. Or it may be that I love people in a way where I don't allow the change. Our friendship, relationship was not centered on religion.
Yeah, I mean, if you put maintaining the relationship above all else, then yeah, and I think that that's what a lot of people do, and I think that that's kind of where I think some of us just think differently in this community than others, right? And then we talk about the diversity of perspectives. So I think for a lot of people, that's their priority, right? But for me, I felt like in certain relationships, at least, I was making too many compromises in order to maintain the relationships. But and that's where I end up, I think, identifying with something like Lena, because it just ended up being the way it is. Like, so for instance, like a lot of people that are in my life are people I work with. If you're a person that's in my life because of work, then what you believe just doesn't matter. I don't necessarily I just don't have a lot of religious friends, and then most of the religious friends I had are either the people in my family or they're people from church, and the people from church really just stop putting effort into relationships with people who aren't part of the church anymore. So, and then people in my family just don't relate to me the same way now that I'm a not believer. They just don't care anymore about, they're checked out of my life, right? It's just like we have a very superficial, meaningless relationship where I said it's literally like just like they're dead. It's just a matter. So that's just like, oh, this isn't the call, they're dead. Oh, everybody's still doing great. Oh, good to hear from you. Cool. Yeah, go Bengals. See you later. I mean, it's just nothing. So yeah, I think that's what we're dealing with. But I think so. For instance, if I said, hey, we're just never going to talk about religion because I want to make sure I can come home for the holidays and that we can talk twice a week. And so we're just going to talk twice a week and I'm going to come home and bow my head for prayer and eat turkey. Then yeah, I'm sure I could do that. If I decided that, you know, we want to let Christians hang out and gather and we just said no matter what type of crazy Christian shit they say, we're gonna make sure they can hang out with us next week. Like, then yeah, we could do that. It's just I'm I'm just in a different place right now. But yeah, I know that's where a lot of people are.
Well, any individual's primary responsibility is to be themselves. That's it. You have to be who you are.
Sure.
And they're going to be one aspect of myself that I don't like is, I haven't been responsible with the way I've eaten. And that's had some adverse effects on my health and opportunities. So that's something I need to deal with. However, it's far from the only thing about me. It's not the only thing about myself that I don't like. There's myriad examples of things about myself that I do like. And I can introduce you to other people who would say, oh, yeah, I like that about you too. And that's the same for all of us. The things you can change, where you see there's a need to change, work on that. When it comes to dealing with other people, it is not their responsibility to degrade you, to make you feel bad. It's better to have people in your life who are uplifting, right? Who aren't going to be trolling you. So if that's the way that you are going to build the patterns around you, you have a support system, not a system of people who just can't wait to rip you apart. You're doing it right. So if you are avoiding some people, if Lena is avoiding some people, realize that may be a very healthy thing to do. I say that knowing we all realize not everybody in this group or that group is going to mistreat you. However, in this or that group, the ones who will may be in larger numbers.
Yeah, and also for some of us, it's just.
And how much time do you want to spend sorting?
Exactly.
Let the good ones come to you.
Right.
Just, by being yourself, we've all seen this. By being ourselves, right? Other people are drawn to us. Someone asked me, "Oh, how do I meet people in LA?" I'm like, "Go start doing the things you really like doing." And you're going to keep running into people who also really like doing those things. And there's your new social circle. You'll meet a woman who does this or that, like skydiving or something like that. Or you meet a man who does racing cars or whatever. Whatever you're into, you're going to find other people that you'd be attracted to doing the same thing. So go start doing that. But along with that are many other people who are going to be really supportive in your life in areas that are not those activities. You build those friendships, you build those relationships. That's a great way to do it. But your primary responsibility, and this is how I feel, even if you have children, is for you to be yourself because your children are watching. And you're imprinting on them. And if they see you don't take care of yourself, you better hope that they're picking that idea that they need to do that for themselves up from someone else.
Yeah. So for me, like, just kind of to wrap things up, like I would, I want to empathize with people who, Mother's Day is a hard day because, you're not in an ideal place with your parent. And one of the videos I was watching about this topic, a woman called about her relationship with her father, and part of what the guy who took the call said was, this just may be a thing that is an issue. It may be a thing that's a problem, and it may be a problem you can't solve from where you're at, and they can't solve from where they're at. That's not to say the situation will never improve, but you may not be able to bring it to resolution, under your own power right now. And I think part of maybe what people in that situation like me need to do is you do whatever you have to do to get through Mother's Day. Like, in other words, for me, some of it felt like, you know, you do what you do so you're not making it worse, right? And I hate to say it, but sometimes that's part of being in an abusive relationship, if that's what you feel like you're in, right? Is sometimes you do things to avoid further abuse, right? And if that means send your mother a Mother's Day card so that it doesn't become part of a gaslighting backlash down the road, then maybe you do that. But also, maybe what you learn to celebrate is your independence from that relationship. It's very difficult for me to deal with the situation like moving or any other kind of hardship in life without the support of your family. And part of the process I've been going through is sort of mourning the loss of a support system. But I look forward to getting on the other side of that situation and then feeling more concrete in my independence, as if to say, I suspected as a result of the difficulties in our relationship that, in fact, this person had become someone I couldn't count on. Now I know that this, in fact, is a person I can't count on, and I'm a bit more secure moving forward without them in my life, and in the fullness of there really is no burden on me to take responsibility for mending that fence, right? Without cooperation to do the same from the other side. So, that it can be okay. It can be okay to not be in the same situation other people are in with regard to their relationships, and yeah. Also, I think it's tough, but you can be thankful for where you're at. You can be thankful that the person raised you to be safe, and that they took decent care of you, and maybe that even they helped contribute to you becoming a type of person who takes a reasoned and I want to say takes a stance with some integrity, even if that causes conflict, right? Like, we've probably been in that situation where you feel like, well, a person raised me to be honest, and a person raised me to be honorable, so now I'm going to be honest and honorable, even if that means I have conflict with this person. But I appreciate them teaching me right from wrong, even if helping me learn right from wrong, even if I don't think they're always right. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, now I'm done.
Okay. Well, I've lived in this house for over almost 7 years now. I've never seen the foundation that it sits on. So an individual can be similar to that, in that the foundation you had as a child, while you're being reared, sort of birth to maybe 20 or so years old. By the time you're 34, we don't necessarily see that when we talk to you, when we look at you, when we interact with you. We see what you've built on top of that. So I'd say everyone should probably keep that in mind. It's what you build on that foundation. The foundation may be awful, but you probably could engineer yourself pretty well into being the best you can be. And you may even be able to, when you get the right tools in hand, make repairs to that foundation, because that happens too, in order so that you can be your very best and you can be solid and standing tall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with that, gang, I hope everybody has a happy Mother's Day. So
Yes.
I don't think so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hang out and gather. I don't know quite what the game plan is later. I'm gonna make myself dinner and hang out. So we're not gonna put anything serious on we normally have weekly meetings at 9. I'll still be around and gather to meet at 9. But if anybody's around, we'll just hang out, maybe play some games and have some fun, because I want people that are doing family stuff because of Mother's Day to be able to enjoy time with their families. So I'll still be around and gather. We'll still hang out, and we'll still meet at 9, but it'll just be recreational. If you don't have other obligations. All right. So yeah, come link up with us and gather. Links in the description. We'll see you at the ranch. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Be good to yourselves
and each other.
All right, gang. Peace out.
Thank you. Bye-bye.